Subplots. If you've been following my vlogs at all recently, you will have seen that I have been having some subplot struggles. Returned to a previous manuscript of mine that was rife with the subplot struggles, and I am now in the process of removing a subplot and adding a new subplot. And the way I got to this point was, when I was writing the story originally, I did not know, like, what should be in a subplot? What's the purpose? How do I write a subplot that doesn't detract from the main plot? Are all of my subplots just excess noise? And so I ended up with a subplot that didn't need to be in the story, and a missing subplot that very much did need to be in the story. So, to avoid those problems in your own writing, I have extensively researched online how to write a good subplot. And I have come up with two little subplot tests that you can run by your subplot, either to see if the subplot belongs in that story. If you have a little inkling in your head that's like, I don't know if this subplot belongs, run it past this little test. Or, if you're struggling to come up with subplots at all, this little test will help you come up with little subplots. So, usually when you look up how to write a subplot, you get a bunch of generic stuff like, a subplot is a secondary plot in your novel. A subplot supports your main plot. A subplot adds depth to the story. I already knew that. That's not helpful at all. And then the articles just send you on your way, like you're supposed to have learned everything on how to develop and implement subplots into your story so that they don't bog down the story, or send it careening in different directions that it doesn't need to go. So, if you're struggling with subplots, cast away all that knowledge. All you need to know are these two things. These are two subplots that will never lead your story astray. First, a mirror subplot. A mirror subplot is a smaller scale, lower stakes plot that mirrors the events and obstacles of your main plot. And the purpose of it is to show your main character how they can overcome the main plot. This is a subplot for the main character. So, if you feel like your main character only has one plot in the story, the main plot, and you need to add a little depth, or you want to make the plot a little less straightforward so they just go from knowing nothing to knowing how to solve the plot. The end. Then this is a good subplot for you. For example, if you have a peasant trying to overthrow an overbearing government agent and president, I don't know. But perhaps you have the peasant have an overbearing boss, or father, or mother, and throughout that conflict of the overbearing person in their personal life, constantly throwing obstacles in front of them and putting them down, your main character learns what makes an overbearing person tick, how to overcome them, how to stay strong in the face of constant belittlement, and then they can use that knowledge to overthrow the emperor at the end. That is a mirror subplot. The second part of this little subplot test is for secondary characters. So characters in your story that aren't your main character, that need a subplot of their own. They would do nicely with a contrasting subplot. So, this is a subplot for a secondary character where they face similar obstacles as the main character, but they make different / opposite decisions. And so the outcome is different. For example, if you are writing a tragedy of sorts and you have your hero on a journey to overcome some obstacle, but at the end of the story he fails because of some fatal flaw, then your contrasting subplot would be a secondary character, perhaps a friend of the hero, sibling, or, somebody on a different timeline. They would be facing similar obstacles to the hero of the story, except they make different, more positive choices and are able to overcome the obstacles of the plot rather than falling victim to the fatal flaw that they share with the hero. Does that make sense? When you research subplots, they're going to give you a whole little list of things that you can make a subplot in your story. For example, a romantic subplot, a little MacGuffin subplot, you gotta go find some things, or subplot where you have to achieve something first, like some small step before you can get to the main plot. And those never do it for me. Those always just kind of feel extraneous in my stories, and in stories that I read, in the published world. And they're also not very helpful because, you're looking up how to write subplots because you realize that your subplots are a little bit meandering, and then you get a bunch of examples to just create more meandering subplots, and that is not helpful. So, all you need to do is, if you're struggling to create a subplot, think to yourself, is this, or could it be, a mirror subplot, if it is for the main character, or a contrasting subplot, if it's for a secondary character? It's quite helpful because you can actually use this and kind of mend and twist your current subplots to fit these parameters. And then it will make it feel like, yes, this is part of the story, this needs to be in the story. Without this subplot, the story couldn't continue. The story wouldn't be as full, have as much meaning. That's how you know you've got a good subplot. So, some quick tips for getting the most out of your subplots. First, it is important that your subplot, no matter what it is, even if it's a contrasting or mirror subplot, that it has an arc over the course of the story. subplot can't really take place in just like one scene. You know, hero pops in, meets someone who is less threatening than the main bad guy, but is similar to the main bad guy, and they suddenly learn how to overcome the main bad guy. That would be a terrible subplot, very poorly paced. You need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there needs to be logical progression between the growth and overcoming of obstacles in the subplot, just like in the main plot. And another little tip, in order to ensure that your subplot does not overtake the story's main plot, a good way to do this is to just set up the subplot, you know, however, if you're making it similar or contrasting the main plot, but put it down a few notches of stakes. So give it lower stakes. That way the complications of the subplot increase the overall complications and tension of the story, but you never get lost trying to overcome the complications of the subplot because they are lower than the stakes of the main plot. I.e. the example of the hero learning how to overcome an overbearing parent versus an overbearing emperor. I hope this was helpful. This was very helpful to me in my writing. When I was trying to implement subplots into my poor subplotless story, I couldn't find anything. I was all over the internet and they were just like, a subplot supports the story. A subplot is different from the main plot, and that was just not helpful in the slightest. So I hope this was helpful. 2 little tests. You can have a subplot for your main character that mirrors the main plot, or you can have a subplot for your secondary characters that is contrasting choices made by your main character. It was just very helpful for me. I hope it was very helpful for you.